As promised, here's the modding and repair video for the Logitech G27 Steering Wheel. We're gonna fix all these problems and we're gonna make it better. Let's go! So in this video, I'm going to show you how to take apart your G27 wheel, and then I'm going to show you how to re-grease the gears, as this will improve the force feedback and the smoothness of your wheel. I'm going to show you how to do some case mods, which will improve the cooling of your wheel. And then the nice juicy bit of repairing the encoder wheel for those of you who don't want to purchase a new one. And finally, the cherry on top, which is installing the passive cooling. And this is going to make it so that you can play with this wheel for 8+ hours. We're going to start off by removing the wheel from the main body. As you see here, this is the wheel off of the body, and I will have the Ifixit guide in the description below that you can follow along with this video as reference. And to start, we're going to remove the 6 screws from the front wheel. Then we're going to take out the circuit board. So you see the 2 little screws here. Take those out. But be careful, there is a wire here. You're going to have to unplug that from the wheel hub. And then on the wheel hub, there are 3 screws here that you're gonna have to take out. They're very long, so be very careful not to strip them. And with that, the steering wheel is now free, with the circuit board as well. And the next step would be to remove the cover off. And to do that, we're gonna have to remove the screws from the bottom of the main body. But I do have to note that you should have some sort of tray, or in this case, I used a shoebox. And that way you can keep track of all the screws that you've taken out so you don't lose them. So the next part is to take out all the screws from the bottom of the main housing. The only part that you don't have to unscrew is this middle island here, which is for the cord to wrap around. Now, you're gonna need your number 1 Phillips screwdriver as well as your number 0 Phillips screwdriver. The shallow screw holes here, those are gonna be your number 1 Phillips screwdriver, and the deeper holes there are gonna require the number 0 Phillips screwdriver. And make sure it's a really long, thin one. Usually they are, but yeah, make sure it is because it's pretty deep in there. Now you might notice that there's some looseness or wobbliness to the C-clamps here, and that might be the reason why your wheel is actually unscrewing itself from your table. There's not much you can do about this because it is an engineering fault, especially if the top knobs of your wheel are broken. But anyways, moving on, if we remove the top housing, we can see the electronics inside. But before that, I just want to touch base on the fake front grills and the vent holes here. They are covered up. Now, some people have said that these are good for third-party mounts, but if you cover them up, they're the only vent holes that you have, and that's going to cause a lot of performance wear and tear. So later in this video, I'm going to cover how to use a Dremel to actually open these holes up. Now the next part is removing the circuit boards. So before we get to those lovely gears and the motors, we're going to have to remove these circuit boards. Now, there are a few screws, but before we remove those screws, we're going to have to unplug these wires. Some of these wires can't be removed first, so you're actually going to have to start off with the top 2 plugs here and then progress over to the next plugs down from there until you reach the bottom 2 plugs, and then you can take those out as well. They are really solidly stuck in there, so it's going to require some force. There are some pry tools that you can get from Ifixit, or like basically they're used for phone screens. And they're really handy for this sort of stuff. But if you feel comfortable with your hand strength or finger strength, then just go ahead and pop these out. And, you know, there's a bit of tolerance for some mistakes. You know, I kind of hit the circuit board components a little bit, sometimes with my screwdriver and junk, but that's okay. This thing can handle it. It's totally fine, and it's not going to break. So as you see here, I took out these 2 plugs from here. They're color coded, so that helps a lot. And you can tell that the top 2 are braided, and then the next one on the left side, the next red and black one, is not braided. So that's how you know that, which one goes into which. And of course, follow this video here for reference as to which wires go where. And once you've unplugged the wires, you can see here in the red circles where you need to unscrew the screws with your number 1 screwdriver. And then once those are off, you can pop off the circuit board. And beneath that is a metal back plate, which you can unscrew these 4 screws as well, which frees up the motor hub. And once this motor hub is free, we can then access the gears. So once that is off, you can literally just lift it off and it'll come off. And you can see here the old grease that was on it, and there's the motor hub as well. So you can see a little plastic shaft in the middle of the motor hub that goes onto this rail here. And there's also a metal spring, so you're going to want to make sure you don't lose that, as that gives a little bit of space. And also you can take off the little plastic cap here on the right motor, which will reveal the encoder wheel. Now it's kind of hard to see here, but essentially this is the encoder wheel. I'll actually put a picture up so you can see. Mine is cracked. We'll be fixing that later. Now next up is re-greasing the gears. Now this is a very important step, as re-greasing the gears will improve your force feedback strength, as well as make it easier to turn the steering wheel, and it's also going to make it quieter, because you may have noticed that the force feedback is weak and turning the wheel is not so easy, as it feels very stiff, and you probably heard the grinding noises as you turn your wheel. Now the reason this is because the grease on the G27 steering wheel is pretty old, 8 years old in fact, as it was last off the production line in 2015, so it's a long time since these things have been greased. The grease that I use is a multi-purpose synthetic grease by Superlube, and I'm also going to use a multi-purpose synthetic oil as well by Superlube. Now the reason I chose this grease and oil is because the 2 motors in the steering wheel here are actually the same motors you would find in many RC cars. There's a lot of plastic parts in it, so the synthetic grease is not going to react with them. And as a plus, it's food grade. So if you touch the grease and you touch your mouth, you're not going to poison yourself, which is awesome. So one thing you're going to have to do before you start greasing the gears is clean them. What I like to use is a 99% alcohol diluted with water. And you're going to want to spray that all over the gears. So everything that had grease, you're going to spray that right on there. And make sure you use paper towel or some kind of cloth. Don't use anything that gives off too many little bits, as they will get stuck in the gears. So once you're done cleaning the gears, you're going to want to start greasing them. Now the amount of grease that you should be using is what you see here on my little wooden spoon. And then when you are coating the gear, you want to evenly spread it so that the valleys are filled up with the grease right up to the peaks here. And you don't want any grease coming out of the edges, because once you put that on the comb gear, for instance, it's just going to squish out anyway. So make sure you don't put too much. And you're going to want to put them on every gear. So that includes the helical gears on the shaft as well as the comb gear. So even if the 2 are touching, you're going to want to fill them in. I also put synthetic oil on the caps here where the springs are, because these are used to stabilize the helical gears to the hub. And putting the silicone oil in there is going to reduce the wear and tear on these. So it's going to prolong the life of your G27 wheel. So, you can pass it down to your kids if you feel like it. And then once you're done oiling the spring and cap, the next part you're going to want to oil up is the bearings. So there's actually 2 bearings on top of the main gear. And where you're going to want to shoot the oil into is right into the seam. So you're going to want to go on the outside seam and the inside seam. So you see this little black cover here. Just keep doing it. If you want, you can put more oil than I did. Honestly, mine is fine with the amount that I put on. Just make sure that you put enough there And know that even if it doesn't look like it's going inside, it will eventually make its way through the more you rotate this thing. And once you're done greasing, all you gotta do is pop back the main gear onto the metal backplate where the RC motor's on, and make sure you put the comb gear onto the bottom half of the wheel as well. And one thing to note is you want to align the small gear to the left of the comb gear so that the comb gear is fully to the right side. And make sure you put that metal spring in there first before you put this on. And with that, you're done. You've just successfully greased and oiled your steering wheel. Now up next is opening the air vents. Now this is going to improve your cooling passively by allowing airflow to travel through the top vents out towards the front grille. Now the supplies you're going to need for this are shown in the picture here. In the top left I have a Dremel 4000, but you can use any other Dremel that you wish as long as it can cut metal and plastic. I also have scissors here, which you're going to use to cut the vent mesh here. Now, the vent mesh that I use is just the front screen for my computer case, but you can easily go online or your local hardware store and buy yourself some dryer vent mesh, as shown here. And finally, you're going to need to shell out at least another $10 for a thin cut grinding disc. This one is 1.5 inches in diameter, as opposed to the grinding discs that come with the Dremel. Those are a little bit too thick for what we're about to do here. So let's begin. You're going to start off with the top shell of the body here, where the air vents are, and go at it with your Dremel. You're going to want to use a RPM speed of 25 to 30 on the Dremel. Now, the technique to avoid splatters and a buildup of melted plastic is to just go at it sideways and cut off bits at a time. Don't try to take the whole thing off in one go, because you're just going to create a big blob of melted plastic, and you're also going to create a whole lot of fumes. It's not going to be nice. There will be a lot of debris shooting out from this, so do be aware that some hot bits of plastic may hit your skin and may even melt on it, so if you want, you should wear some polyvinyl workshop gloves. Now you can see here that I'm using scissors to sort of pluck away at the bits of plastic that have melted on around the vents. As you're grinding, those little bits of plastic fuse on there, so you want to do this periodically in between the 2 millimeters at a time grinding technique. That way you don't get bits of plastic that melt on top of already melted plastic, causing it to fuse even further. As you can see here, it looks like it's literally splattered, like it does turn partially liquid. It's very annoying to take off, so just keep plucking away at it. Don't worry about scratching the interior. Nobody's gonna see it ever. But you really wanna make sure that the air vents are clean and crisp. This is gonna allow for maximum airflow. If you have any little bits kind of sticking out like teeth into the air vent holes, that will actually affect your airflow a lot more than you think it will. Millimeters matter here, so get that as clean as possible so you will never have to go back in there again. Another thing that you can do to clean out the little teeth is to take some scissors, if they're thin enough here, or an X-Acto knife, and just kind of move it back and forth, or just scrape it off through the top of the air vents, and that basically gets it out as well. And then after you've cleaned out the teeth, you can pretty much grind down the rest of the plastic that's sticking out underneath the air vents until it looks roughly smooth like this. Don't worry about the little bits that aren't in the way of the air vents. Those won't really do much. So you're done there. But wait, there's still more. We still have to drill into the front grills of the wheel case. This will allow the airflow coming in from the top vents to escape. Otherwise, they have nowhere to go and they'll just keep circulating in there. This part is a little bit trickier though, so if you have a vise, use it. If you're poor like me, just use your hips. So, you will start by using either a drill bit or a sanding bit. Since I'm using my hips and not a vise, I'm using the sanding bit as it has less force and is easier to hold. But if you can get this stable on a vise, then just use the drill bit. Just be careful not to crack the plastic, as it will become weaker due to this loss of structural plastic. You will drill 4 holes in each corner, roughly spaced 1 centimeter away from the edge. and then you will take a grinding disc and carefully position it between the two holes on the top and grind away, cutting a nice flat slit into the space between the two holes. Just remember to take it slow, and if you get too many plastic bits shooting out, stop for a few seconds and then continue. You don't want the plastic around it to get too hot and outright melt. Once the top cut is done, you can then proceed to the bottom cut and just make another slit with your grinding disc between the two bottom holes. And once you're done making that slit between the two bottom holes, you're going to make a diagonal cut starting from the top right corner and going diagonally downwards towards the center. And then you're going to make another diagonal cut from the left corner where you made the hole, going diagonally down towards the center from the left. And basically this will cut out the shape of the grill from the front, and you can just pop it out. And we're left with this once you pick off the last remaining little bits. So how you're going to get rid of the extra bits on the side is you're actually going to make small little slit cuts into them, roughly about 3 to 5 cuts, going down from the bottom, spacing them out about at least 1 millimeter each, like so. And with these, you can either grind them off with the disc, or you can push them out with the thumb, or grind them down with the wheel attachment, the small little cylindrical grinder wheel. Either of those works. It's up to you what you feel most comfortable with. And then at the end, you can simply take your grinding wheel, the cylindrical one, and grind all the edges down. Now, any little bits that are still sticking out might be a little tough to take out with a grinding cylinder, so you're going to want to use your grinding disc again and sort of cut into those a bit. And once you're done that, we can then begin making the screen. Now, making the screen for the front grille is very straightforward. You just cut out a rectangular piece, roughly the width and height of the front grille area. You put some super glue around the edges, press it in, and within seconds it should be dried and ready to go. That's it. Congratulations, you've now just made a real front grille on your steering wheel. Give yourself a pat on the back if you made it this far. You deserve it. Alright, we're finally at the encoder wheel repair. So this one is actually relatively simple to do the fix, and it's super important because it deals with the wheel alignment problem. The reason why you've probably clicked on this video or other videos in order to figure out how to fix that issue with your steering wheel. But essentially it has to do with this encoder wheel. Now I'm just going to give a little bit of a breakdown on how this encoder wheel works. So how an optical encoder works is, as the name suggests, it works using an optical light source and a phototransistor or a light sensor. So as you can see here in the diagram, the LED is going to flash a light into the phototransistor. Now the phototransistor will read the light so long as the LED source can can shoot the light beam through the slots. When it's in between the slots, it's going to hit hard plastic and therefore it won't read. So it'll be open when it's through the slot, closed when it's in between the slot, and then open again when it hits the next slot. These intervals are able to be measured and read over time. Now, the reason why the actual encoder wheel is circular and a disc is not by accident. It's on purpose because it will measure all the increments in 360 degrees. So if we have our top slot at the very top as 0, kind of like, a clock, 12 o'clock, and we rotate the wheel 360 degrees, that slot will end up going around the circumference of the circle and then make it right back to 12 o'clock again. That'll be one full rotation. Now this is important because it allows us to measure how much we have turned the wheel and to which angle it is turned at. Now, since our optical encoder is broken, or in my case, cracked right down the center, this is going to affect the distance measured between the slots. And since these are finely tuned, it's really expecting it to be the same distance between each slot, which is why the wheel alignment problem exists and why your wheel will not center back to the 0 position, because it wasn't able to read the angle of that slot rotating around in 360 degrees. It must have skipped, or maybe it overcounted, because when you're turning the steering wheel, the heat and the rotational forces are actually spreading that optical encoder apart, since it's just made of plastic. So you're going to get incorrect readings, and that's exactly why your steering wheel is not going back to the 0 position, and it keeps going off to the left each time, or the right, whichever it does for you. So super gluing our steel washer to the back of our plastic encoder wheel is going to secure the encoder wheel so that it does not warp or bend when you're rotating the steering wheel, and thus we get our accurate measurements back. Now, normally optical encoder wheels are made out of metal, and they're used for a whole wide range of industries, such as manufacturing, in your automobile, anything that really needs to measure the rotational distance or your angle of whatever machine that you're running. Now, just before we get started with the optical encoder repair, if you do plan on purchasing a new optical encoder, make sure that you count the number of slots that are in the encoder wheel that you have in your G27, because there are 2 different ones that were used. In the old G27, they have a 60 slot encoder, but the new G27 has a 30 slot encoder. Don't really think too much about why they use 30 or 60, just make sure that you keep it the same. So if yours had 60, use 60. If yours had 30, buy the 30 slot encoder online. So make sure you check for that. Whew, what a long explanation. But I felt it was absolutely necessary to explain to you how an optical encoder works, so that you know exactly why I'm simply using a steel washer to fix this, because that's all that's required. It's that simple. I'm going to use a steel washer, and I'm going to place it onto the shaft of the plastic optical encoder and simply super glue it on. And that's going to do wonders. So all you need is a steel washer. You can find one at your local hardware store. Just make sure that it's not too large of a diameter that it blocks the slots in the encoder wheel. You're going to need to keep those clear, but make sure that it can fit around the center. Even if it's off by, a micron, that's okay. You can use the grinding attachment on your Dremel and grind away on the inside, and eventually it will fit. And also make sure you put a little bit of super glue along the seams of your encoder wheel crack, because that's just going to help to keep it as stable as possible. And with that, you just pop your encoder wheel back onto the shaft of the motor and make sure that it fits properly inside of the circuit board that contains the optical sensor and the LED. So make sure that there's enough clearance that when the optical wheel rotates, it's not going to hit any of those pieces. So there should be a little bit of a gap between both sides. And with that, you can pop the cap back onto your RC motor and you're done. We have finally reached the passive cooling mod stage. This is a very simple installation, but it does require that most everything is put back together except for the actual top case cover, which we will do after we install the passive cooling. So you can follow the Ifixit guide that I've linked below to put everything back together, but at this stage, you should already have the gears greased and placed back on to the bottom frame, and you should already have the optical encoder capped and already shafted onto the RC motor. So all that's left is to put the metal bracket which holds the circuit board on. So you screw that on and make sure that the anti-static plastic is on the bottom part as well before you screw it in. Then you're going to screw in the circuit board. But before you screw in the circuit board, make sure that all the wires on either side are out of the way and available for you to freely grab, because if you have one wire hanging out underneath but throughout onto the other side, once you screw that circuit board in, it will be stuck there. So make sure that you keep the wires on either side, either respective side, before screwing down the circuit board. Then it's as simple as plugging in the wires, and voila. Now, just before you install the passive cooling fins, make sure you give this a good spray dusting just to get rid of any debris or cat hair. It's always good practice to do this. Also sounds kind of nice. Now we're on to the passive cooling fins. Now I picked up a 2-pack of RC car cooling fins because the motors on the G27 are the same as a lot of RC motors used for RC cars, and they drift with those too actually, and they get hot, so they use these passive cooling fins to passively cool the motors. They're very simple to install. You just pop them right onto the RC motors, and that's all you need to do. There's no cooling paste required, no screwing of anything. You just pop them right in. So I'll show you how that works. Now, just a little bit of info on these. The shape of them is really nice because it actually perfectly fits in the G27. But essentially what these do is these radiate the heat from the RC motor through the aluminum fins and direct them away from the actual RC motors themselves. In my case, I kind of have non-symmetrical fins, so you're going to want to have the part that's sticking outwards to the sides and the shorter side on the inside. So most of the heat gets directed out. And these will essentially vent out towards the top of the air vents that we just made. Do make sure to straighten them up, because I didn't straighten them in this before I finished the video, but I did straighten them after, so make sure they're all nice and neat. So now that the passive cooling fins are on, we can simply make sure the C-clamps are sticking up and in place, put the top cover on, and then we poke the hub shaft through, and just like the beginning on how I showed you to remove the steering wheel to open up the insides, we're actually going to go in reverse order from that. You can also follow the Ifixit guide as well if you need some extra detailed information, but it's fairly straightforward. If you got this far, this part is no problem. And you just screw on the steering wheel, and bam, you are done. Your wheel is good to go. Just a couple words of caution though, do double check that you have done all of the steps before you put on the top cover and the steering wheel, because there are 3 long screws on the wheel hub that can easily strip if you have to go and unscrew them and screw them back in multiple times. So with all of that done, we're gonna plug back in the G27 to our computer. Of course, deal with all the weird firmware issues. That's going to be a whole lot of fun, and you might actually think your thing is broken, but it's not, trust me, and I will put some links down below to help you with any of those weird firmware or connection issues, because they are very weird, but they are solvable, and yeah, you won't have any problem. But here is the steering wheel and me using it.
Nope.
It's pretty nice, actually. The first thing that I noticed was that it was smoother and it was stronger. That was the good thing. And of course, the wheel alignment problem was gone, and now my wheel works, and it's really nice and doesn't sound so clunky. However, there is one little issue that I noticed where if I turn my wheel all the way to the right, it makes this little snapping sound, and I went back in to try to fix it, and I followed the Ifixit guide to a T, and I don't know what I did wrong, but I don't know. It just makes this weird clicking sound, but it doesn't break or anything. I can go really hard on it. It's fine. My guess is that the comb gear kind of lifts up a little bit, and I'm not sure exactly why that is. If any of you know why that is, please let me know in the comments below. Okay, so all in all, this was a very long video to make, and if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I just want to wrap up with some of my final thoughts as to whether or not it's worth it, because in the previous review that I stated, no, it was not worth it to buy this steering wheel knowing that it's going to break to eventually fix it. But if you're like me and you love the challenge and you just don't want to break the bank and you're interested in drifting, but you're also a techie, this is a rewarding experience. It's an adventure all on its own. So in a monetary sense, it's worth it. In a time sense, it's up to you. It takes like an entire day to repair this thing, what with all of that and me having to film it too. I didn't get the best footage, so yeah, that's kind of because I don't have like the best equipment to film. But if you want to see me make more videos and you want to see me get like a nicer camera and all of that, all you have to do is just like and subscribe to this video and be on the lookout for any new videos that I make. And who knows, maybe I'll get to that point where I do a much more professional video and really show you every single step in every single way that you can do this, and then some. Because I loved this experience of making this video, and I want to make more. And also, if you have done this mod before, or this video made you do this mod and repair yourself, honestly, do me a favor, show me a picture of that. Show me what you did. I'd love to see. If you did anything different, heck yeah, show me. If you want to just say you should have done this way, yeah, let me know too. I'm totally up for hearing people's corrections. I love it. We can all learn something from each other. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. Again, don't forget to like and subscribe so I know that you want to see more of these videos. And don't forget to smoke those moddable nugs. Honestly, thank you.